Fort Erie, Niagara Region, Ontario, Canada, Earth with Councillor George McDermott. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm glad the wind stopped and we have sunshine out there.
Yeah.
It's a good day.
Yeah, it's Sunday, December 12th, I believe, and it was just last night we had the craziest storm it seems like every year we have one that's just as crazy as the last one.
Yeah.
Now, was there a lot of calls that you got? A lot of people freaking out?
No, I didn't get any calls last night, but that had a lot to do with the electricity being out most of the evening. But there was, significant flooding in the flooding areas that we do have around town. The river was coming over the breakwall pretty good, and so it was a very busy night for infrastructure staff out there. The fire department, they were all out there on the ball. But I think it was handled very well. We don't know exactly what the damages are. Probably won't have a report until Monday on that.
Was there a lot of sections there that closed the road? I know in Niagara Parks they usually have to close off anything around Mather's Arch near the Peace Bridge.
Niagara Parks and up by Point Avenue Way and in Thunder Bay areas where it's, the water's pretty heavy. I know they were having real trouble on Point Avenue Road because the dirt and stuff was just piling up on the road. So, that was going to take a little bit of a while to clean up.
It's always that double-edged sword about living in such a beautiful place, right next to the water. It's it looks great most of the time, and then once in a while you got to shovel the sand off your front step.
Yes. Yes, you do.
And I guess the Skyway was closed yesterday too. But so I'm surprised it wasn't too much in the way. There was just even driving here, I figured I'd have a lot of different detours of there's a tree on this street. Trees usually don't lay on this road. When I was out for a run this morning in Niagara Lake, I saw a bunch of trees that were in my way. So kind of had to do a bit more parkour when I was running around. So it became a bit of an obstacle course instead of a nice straight line.
So I have areas in my ward that when winds come up, the past history since I've been a councillor here, where trees have fallen. I was out the road checking those areas out. We did have one tree go down by the Fort Erie International Academy. Lucky for them, it didn't look like there was much damage done there. And the areas that I was concerned with, it wasn't touched at all. So very happy about that.
Do they have any trained arborists at the school, or do they train for that?
No, they don't. They don't. And we only have one at Town Hall. So, very fortunate that those hard-hit areas that normally cause us grief down at this end of town didn't do it this time around. So we're quite happy about that.
Yeah, and he'll probably be pretty busy this week.
Yes. Yeah, probably.
Now, does Fort Erie have an urban tree bylaw? I know in Niagara Lake they had passed one, and I know some people have had some trouble with when they want to cut a tree down, they now have to go through a bit of a process, and some people I've heard have even had a tree fall on their house in the middle of applying to get their tree cut down.
Right. Yes, we do. We do have that, and sometimes they're tedious when it comes to especially the ones that come off of public property, I'll give you an example down by Bowen Road Park here, where we had a number of trees come down. They were coming down off of town property on other people's property, and normally you get a big hubbub about insurance and such, but when you have those big events like that, I think the town really shines in those areas because it's, they throw all that out the window and they deal with the problem at the time and figure it out after. Mm-hmm. But there is a tree management program here, and so sometimes that's a benefit to us. Sometimes it's not so much.
Yeah, because at least I guess on the positive side, it's so that you can keep kind of a natural canopy. If there's especially a lot of older growth areas where you want to preserve that. Having that tree line in a neighborhood. Plus, there's all the environmental benefits. Keeping your house cooler by having the trees, take a lot of the sunlight, provide a lot of shade. But at the same time, now it's a little bit tougher if there's, a bit more of a process than just getting the old chainsaw out and chopping the tree down.
And back when I was young, those canopies were very obvious in communities such as Ridgeway and such. But you don't see that as much anymore. Those trees are no longer there. So I like the canopied streets myself. So it makes the streets so much more beautiful. And like I say, it does kind of keep the sun out of people's areas and stuff. but you don't see them as much in the small communities anymore. They're almost have disappeared, almost.
Well, it's funny because isn't it one of Fort Erie's logos? It might be one of the previous ones. 1/4 of it, I think, was trees because of how significant trees were to the character of the town.
I think you're right.
I forget. I think one of the other ones was Fort. I was going to say Fort George, Fort Erie itself, like the actual old fort, and I can't remember what the other two pictures were. Probably the Peace Bridge and. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe chocolate from Nyes in Stevensville or something was the 4th part of the logo.
Maybe. If not, it should have been.
Yeah.
I mean, Nyes, everybody knows Nyes, right?
Yeah, not sponsored, but great chocolate. So definitely, go stop by. And if you're ever in Stevensville, if you're ever on your way to Ridgeway or Crystal Beach and you pass through. But so I just wanted to, I guess, kind of go back to, I know you've been involved in politics for your whole life, and I know you've told me these stories a few times, but when was the first time that your name was on a ballot for any kind of a political office?
I believe it would have been, I was 18, I think, the first time I ran for councillor here.
Wow.
So I was one of the younger ones. I got hammered pretty good. And then I had to run for regional council here at Fort Erie, and that at the beginning of the campaign, it was just going to be me and the regional councillor that I was running against. And then a well-known politician in town, Doug Martin, hopped into the race, and that was the end of me. You know, so while I had an opportunity there for a while, you know, nomination day just was kind of crept up on me, and that happened. So I did get beat handily there as well. And then I ran for federal politics in Chatham. That's where my son was born.
And who was the leader of the NDP at that time?
Ed Broadbent.
Okay, and who was he running against? Who were the other two? Who was the Liberal and the Conservative at that time?
Pierre Trudeau and Joe Clark.
Okay, so yeah, some pretty heavy hitters out there.
Yeah, but my job basically was to go in and give them a good show.
Keep the party alive.
Keep the party moving. And subsequent to that, the following election, although I was offered to come back there, I didn't. And they actually won the seat. So, I mean, good job there on preparing it for the next person, right?
Yeah.
So, as much as you don't like to run like that you always think you have hope you're going to win an election, this one here, I was more settled that the day that I entered the race, it wasn't, I just had to be a good candidate and work hard and try and up that support for the New Democrats back then.
Yeah, no, that's pretty bold. I mean, it's definitely probably a little easier than being a Liberal in Fort McMurray, but definitely that's, it's got to be tough to kind of stay motivated as you're going through when you see some writing on the wall or you see the political history in the area, but kind of cool to think that you were able to be part of what was the changing of the tide over in that riding and to see an NDP down the road that was to get elected.
Yeah, but you know what? You don't, I was, when I heard who had won, I was, happy for him. I really didn't have any regrets about not coming back. I mean, I was married and I had children, and so they were the main focus. Then, of course, you don't want to rile your wife up too much, especially if you want to be a politician.
Yeah.
As much as I did at the time. And then when I got back, I kind of just became an advocate for Fort Erie on issues that I could deal with, and met up with Kim Crater. And Kim Crater turned out to be a very good friend of mine, and we worked on many, many things, including the contracts for the Fort Erie racetrack, and we worked on healthcare issues.
And so Kim Crater, he was the member of provincial parliament for the Niagara Falls riding, Liberal, and was he a minister of a certain cabinet position?
No, he didn't have a cabinet position, and I always thought that really was a good thing, because once you get to cabinet, sometimes you kind of lose your perspective. You don't have that grassroots thing going that he did. You're not able to go to every event. And Kim Crater is a politician. I don't know if the present MPP, Wayne Gates, kind of follows his type of leadership role, where you get out to every event and you're very visible in the community. And Kim was one of those that would take advantage of anybody that wanted to help him here. And I was very aware of the issues that were going on here, so it was a big help to him as much as he was a big help to me. You know, we brought Bridges here.
Bridges Community Health Center.
Yes. So, I mean, that was a big deal. We almost lost it the night before. I mean, kind of an exciting 24-hour period there that we had to get the government to change their mind to get it here. But as it turned out, they did bring it here. And it's been very effective for community health care here.
Yeah, and to this day, you still have the Douglas Memorial Hospital here, and I know that that was another big campaign that you were behind to try to keep the hospital when they were threatening on pulling the plug on that.
Well, we've always been very challenged by the fact that nobody seems to want us, no government seems to want us to have the health care we deserve. When the Conservatives were in office, the NHS was given pretty much, we had to pretty much go with the NHS, so we had a perfectly good hospital and probably the only hospital in Niagara.
And that's the Niagara Health System.
The Niagara Health Systems, right. So we got forced into a situation where they took over the whole thing, right. So quite typically that doesn't benefit a small community like ours. And at that time we weren't really growing all that quickly. So, but we only had, this hospital here was the only one in Niagara that was actually in the black. So it was a very well-run hospital, run by John Canaloro, and he was very good. He was a very good administrator, and that's why we're always in the black. And then they came along, they wanted to centralize healthcare, and then we had what they call the HIP review. They were going to close the hospital, and of course the community rallied together on many occasions during that period. So between Russ Wilson, who was in charge of healthcare down at Fort Erie at the time, and Kim Crater, there was 5,000 people in our LeisurePlex protesting the fact and giving their messages to the HIP review people that, you know, this is not something we wanted to do.
Yeah, because the next closest hospital would be Niagara Falls, which you're almost going all the way up to downtown Niagara Falls, like a 20-30 minute drive, which every second counts when you're having a heart attack or a stroke or any other kind of medical emergency.
And even worse, if that wasn't available, you had to go to the St. Catherine's Hospital.
Right.
So, you know, they didn't care about the winter months when you had to drive back and forth. You know, sometimes, you know, the weather gets pretty bad here, even for ambulances when the time doubles. So time is always of the essence when somebody's having a heart attack or having some troubles that need to be dealt with right away. So even that argument wasn't holding any water. So eventually what happened was we had a HIP review and had all the players at the table. And it didn't work out very well for the NHS, that HIP review, because there was a lot of nasty stuff being said at the table, and really kind of threatening our healthcare. It was kind of like you want a review, we'll give you a review.
Felt like a mafia shakedown, like.
Well, I don't want to say mafia shakedown, but it was a one-sided affair. So at that time, you know, I kind of got fed up with what I was listening to, and we did get an opportunity to get the mayor in to see the premier for a good amount of time. And
the premier at that time was Dalton McGuinty.
Dalton McGuinty, yeah. So what actually happened was Kim Crater arranged to get me and Councillor Martha Lockwood was from Crystal Beach, and former Mayor John Teal. And we went to the Liberal Convention that was at Niagara Falls that weekend, just fortunate for us. Talked to Minister Kaplan at the time, and he wasn't too enthused about helping us. But, you know, I'll give McGinty that. He did give the mayor enough time to sit down and have a chat about healthcare. For all intents and purposes, really didn't change matters any, but we became a little bit closer in the fact that we were able to go and actually see the new minister, who was Deb Matthews, who did help us get to the stage that we're at. Because they just wanted to close it. They didn't want to do much about it, right? So urgent care was the thing we were fighting for, and we wanted to make sure that we had 24/7 urgent care, and that ambulances were able to come back and forth, because they weren't coming back and forth. So very important, right? I know that former Minister Smitherman said to me one night that, "Oh, your hospital's not closed," and I had to tell him, "You know better, right? If ambulances do not come to your hospital,
Yeah, is it even really a full hospital?
right? It's not a hospital. It's a first aid station."
Yeah.
And I always look at it this way: we had 24/7 UCC, which is better than not having anything at all. And that was from all the hard work that we've been doing to try and to maintain some sense of decorum in healthcare. Because, you know, people in small communities only want their healthcare to be consistent, reliable, and always there.
Yeah, yeah. You look at Niagara on the Lake, their hospital there slowly over time was gutted, and now today, I mean, luckily there's a Life Labs clinic that happens to be renting space in the basement there, and so it's nice to see there's some sort of healthcare being conducted within that building. But yeah, it's just sad to see that completely eroded away, and I mean, the building is so beyond. It really needs a lot of repairs in order to be brought back to any sort of a standard. I mean, that thing wouldn't pass any building inspections today, I'm sure. And it's just sad because it didn't happen in a day. It just took a long time, and yeah, it's unfortunate we didn't have that same kind of community rally that Fort Erie had to really keep the hospital. I mean, it's beautiful to see that it's even still there today. Now with the upcoming Greater Niagara Falls Hospital that will be coming in the next 5 years, I think it is. Has there been a lot of talk about what will happen with Douglas Memorial and Fort Erie at that time? Will it be decommissioned then? Because at least with this new hospital in Niagara Falls, it at least is a little bit closer to the border of Niagara Falls and Fort Erie. So instead of having to go all the way into downtown Niagara Falls, it'll at least be closer towards Netherby. But has there been any word on what will happen to Douglas Memorial at that point?
Well, there is a dialogue going on. However, it's not with me. It's with the mayor and the president of the NHS presently. So I don't like working in a vacuum, to be honest with you. The mayor knows that too. I mean, and I know the mayor is trying to do what he feels is right. However, I think that, I think we have to push to keep 24/7 urgent care there, because as a community, and you know it because you're in economic development, we are growing by leaps and bounds. And we haven't even met our potential yet. So I know the sign says 33,000 people. I'm pretty certain there's a lot more than that.
Yeah, plus it doesn't count all the seasonal residents that we have. All
Right, which is about 10,000 on top of that, right?
Yeah, when the census bill comes by, imagine how many empty houses there are that don't get that. People that live in Buffalo or anywhere else in the States or anywhere else in the world for part of the year that don't double count themselves as here as well, even though they spend half their year here. That, and then think of all the other people that come in from short-term rentals and campgrounds and other states that we have here. Like, it's a lot more than 33,000 people here at a time on average.
And just behind us over here, there's going to be another 1,000 houses over there at the Rio Vista Golf Course eventually, as soon as they get their archaeological study done, and I think there's a traffic study to be done again. But with that many people, you have to have something in place that is going to serve them on the lesser stuff, right? I mean, it's quite easy for them to go and out of the hospital. If they had to be transported to another hospital, they could be transported. We have to keep these things there. I can't imagine anybody up to, including any politicians, not agreeing with that. So I suspect that the hospital building itself, which is in very good shape, I think they will probably find a way of keeping that here and working through that, whether we add maybe doctor's offices or maybe some long-term care in there. I don't know what the plan is at this point, but I do know that in February, the president of the NHS will be talking to us at our health committee. So maybe she will be able to give us a better sense of what these conversations are that the mayor and our community health people are having, because up to this point we really haven't been given that information. But when you're treated like that over the past number of years, you become very untrustworthy of anything the NHS does. I'm not to that point. I mean, I understand they're trying to centralize healthcare. I got that. But we live at the other end of the spectrum here. And the weather is a little bit different at this end than it's at that end.
Yeah.
So you know there's a difference between snow in Fort Erie and what snowfall they get in St. Catharines.
Yeah, well, it's just funny because you look at even way back from 2011 to 2016, so every 5 years in Canada, Stats Canada does the census, and you saw there was tremendous growth across all municipalities except for, I think, Port Colborne actually decreased over that time span. But it's funny how you would want to, from the province's perspective, I mean, I know they're always looking, how can we cut money here, how can we save money there? And so the thought is, well, if we centralize everything, we'll save money. I mean, if that logic worked well, I guess we would just have one massive hospital in Toronto, and we would all just take shuttle buses in whenever we needed to get our, temperatures checked or whatever we might need. But obviously, there's a need for local health care, and it's funny with a municipality that's growing as fast as Fort Erie is, and I cannot wait until the 2021 census is released, which should be in January of next year, to show really how much we have grown by. Now, this is not like if Fort Erie has not always been as big as it is today even. I mean, that hospital when it was first built, I'm sure the town was much smaller. And if anything, that need of a hospital has gone up more and more as time's gone by. And also, you look at our population's age on average has gotten older over the past few decades. A lot of people moving from across the province down to Crystal Beach and to Ridgeway and other parts of Fort Erie, because it is slightly warmer down here than people that are living up in north of the GTA. So it's kind of funny that there would be these conversations to try to limit the services available at that hospital. And it's funny, if you go to the town of Milton, they actually have this little hospital you can see was their original hospital building, this little brick thing with an H on it. And then just next to it is this massive, massive hospital that they built that's attached to the smaller hospital. And it's because that town was growing tremendously. That's why they had to expand. They didn't just say, let's close this one down and we'll put a GO train line. You can take your grandma in the wheelchair up to Toronto to get a hip surgery. No, they invested to have the actual services right there because that's where people are moving to. Now, that's why, again, I can't wait to see what those census numbers are going to be, because we're going to really just, I think it's, my bet is still around, it's got to be minimum 40,000, but again, who knows if they're reporting incorrectly. I mean, the census year, I believe it was throughout 2021 that they did this census year, and I mean, with COVID, people are still kind of displaced in every different place. So it's going to be hard to tell exactly what is an accurate read of how many people are here, but just from looking at all the growth that we've seen, all the building permits that have been issued, the thousands and thousands of dwelling units that have been added in the last 5 years, it's going to be incredible. And I wanted to kind of go back, because I know you've got a bit more history in Fort Erie. Now, one thing that I was always amazed by is that you used to have a passenger public train that you could take, and it went all the way from, I believe you said, Ridgeway all the way up to Bridgeburg?
Mm-hmm. So when I was a kid, where the Ridgeway Market is today was where the train station was. That train station from that year sits over here where the train is.
Right over at the central
right behind the
fire
central
station.
fire hall. So you'd get your tickets and you'd hop on the train, and the train would take you to the Emerald City from Ridgeway to Fort Erie. I mean, that's what you always thought it was like when you were a kid. And they had a station there, and you get off and you can go and do your shopping in Bridgeburg. And that's when we had, pretty much any store that you could think of was there. We had a Woolworths, we had a Stedman's, we had a A&P, we had a Loblaws, we had 3 or 4 men and women's shops there, real top-notch stuff. We had, I believe we had 2 furniture places, a couple of hardware stores, all that on Jarvis Street back then. And so at Christmas time is especially kind of cool because, had the French fry truck out there, the Salvation Army band playing Christmas carols, and there was more of Fridays and Saturdays were more of a shopping night, and you get out there, you knew everybody out there. It was like you meeting with your friends, right? Then when the box stores came, all those stores were gone. So there's remnants of it. I mean, you could see there's one remnant of a Loblaw store. You could the yellow facade is pretty much telling. But A&P, they were right back to back, and you could. I remember all the smells there. It was just they had the French fry truck, and you could smell the A&P copy from outside. It was like just incredible smells. Plus, they had 3 or 4 restaurants down there too at the time.
And that train line, so where did it connect all the way from outside of the municipality too? Like, could you take it up to Port Colborne or up to Niagara Falls?
I don't think you could. I can't really say for sure, but I do know that we used to take it from there, point A to point B.
That's incredible. Do you remember how much it cost to take a ride?
It wasn't very much.
Got to be back then, what, a nickel or something like that?
It was less than $1 for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny how it seemed like there was a lot of these technologies that were going the way of the dodo bird, and how nowadays they're obviously different, but you've got the GO train line coming back, and that's one of the most exciting developments in Ontario right now, is connecting all these other municipalities to Toronto to try to kind of cash in on that gold rush GTA traffic and bring that all across the province and try to even out that growth. And it's just, there's been many, many factors as to why real estate has exploded here and really across the world in the last few years. But I think that one of those catalyst of growth that really sped up the growth down here was just the news that there is a GO train line that's connected to the falls. And so I always wonder how cool it would be if they could actually continue that line all the way down to Fort Erie to take, I think the last station is right downtown Niagara Falls, and how beautiful that would be too if they could find a route that would go somewhere along the Niagara River. Don't want to piss off too many people that live along the parkway and ruin their view with a new train line, but even if it went somewhere kind of down a more rural route, how nice that would be to have something that would connect you all the way to the bottom corner of Ontario. And I think that would just be incredible when you think of the hundreds of thousands of people that live in Buffalo, that visit Buffalo, whether it's to see a Buffalo Bills game or just to go have the best chicken wings in the world, that they could just hop across the border and then from there hop on one train that would take you all the way up to Toronto. And I just think about how amazing that would be for the growth of this area, to be able to connect people from one of the most American cities in the world, Buffalo, all the way up to the greatest city in Canada, Toronto. I think that would be really cool to see maybe in the next 10 years. And I know there's kind of been a bigger push for urbanization rather than having urban sprawl of single detached homes. Put these people in more dense areas, put them in taller buildings, and have this transit line right along them, and also better for the environment. I believe a lot of these trains are electric now that they have too, so a lot more efficient than, I'm not sure what the one that you took on, if it was nuclear powered or ran on coal or whatnot.
Coal.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was similar to the engine that you've seen there, right? Over at the park. So that isn't the train that actually did it, but it's similar to that.
Yeah, that style. Reminds me of at the end of the third Back to the Future movie, when they're driving the train down it because they're looking for the fastest vehicle they can to get it up to the certain speed so that Marty and Doc could get it fast enough to take them back to modern day. So yeah, no, I'd love to see something. Maybe not like that. I'm cool with the new train designs, green, whatever. I don't know why green has become the GO train color, but maybe it's because it's a little more non-partisan between the blue and the reds and the oranges now.
Christmas train's kind of neat too.
Yeah.
You've seen that, right?
No, so I just thought you meant like Christmas tree.
CP has a Christmas train, and it's like everything's lit up. They have all kinds of different Christmas designs on their train. When you see that, it's kind of cool because there's not from front to back, it's all lights, right? It's pretty cool stuff. So, but no, those days, of course, all good things end, right? Things change, and it's no different than, like Fort Erie kind of is like the happy hunting ground for things that should be going well and aren't.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I'll give you the instance of the racetrack, for instance. So when I was a kid, the racetrack was owned by the Jockey Club. And the Jockey Club owned Fort Erie Racetrack, Greenwood Racetrack, Woodbine Racetrack. And so they had travelers, and everybody had their season that they raced. Everybody had racing days. So we had, at one time, the best jockeys, the best horses, the best trainers, the best owners in Canada coming here. And so this went on for a good length of time. Many of us worked there. You know, one of our first jobs were there at the racetrack. I've had numerous jobs at the racetrack.
So you were one of the horses?
I was with the horses, you know, we mucked stalls, I've exercised when I was a kid, and worked as a porter, security guard. So there was lots of jobs to be had there, so you can always move up a little notch here and there. And then one day, the Jockey Club decides they want to sell the Fort Erie Racetrack, and they want them to have the lesser races, so the smaller purses. They call them the A horses and the B horses. So the only thing they did leave us was the Prince of Wales Stakes, which still today continues to run in Fort Erie. Mm-hmm. So that went okay for a while until Woodbine, of course, their leadership feels that they have some divine right to every bit of racing here. So what they decided to do is to run the same type of races up there that we're running down here, which is not good for us because normally the horses that run at Woodbine, if they aren't as good at that level, they would ship down to Fort Erie and they would run in our races, fill our carts, and in most cases do win races because they were a little better than the ones at Fort Erie, but not good enough for Woodbine. So of course, Woodbine got wind of that, and what they want to do is they try to restrict the trade of people going back and forth by saying, no. If you have your horse here, you're stuck here. You can't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So to me, that was a restriction of trade. It wasn't bad enough that when we had the slots given to us, that one day without any rhyme or reason, the Liberals pulled the plugs on the slots. Mm-hmm. We have slots one day, and they were doing quite well. They were making money, not as much as what the province wanted them to make. And they decided that, well, we're going to send these machines to Toronto because we can make more money from these machines in Toronto than we can here.
Yeah, and that definitely, like you said, caught everyone off by guard. Kind of interesting that they couldn't also just have more machines brought up to Toronto if that was such a good market for them to work in. And yeah, it just seemed like there wasn't any real concrete answer or calculation as to why it was that they pulled them out down here. It just seemed like there was some sort of people almost think it was like a sabotage in a way. And it took away from that complete experience people would have going to the racetrack and then also having that full casino experience. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was really interesting. Even I remember my grandma used to come down here to the racetrack, not even for the racetrack, but to go to the slot machines. And then here it is. Here's family now coming down to Fort Erie for a visit, and could have gone to, even just getting gas at the local station, going to the local convenience store, restaurant, wherever else, going into the maybe nice chocolate on the way back, but not anymore. Now it's like, okay, well, I guess she's just going to Niagara Falls, or take her to Toronto or wherever else it might be. So yeah, it just seemed really, really interesting and really suspicious when that happened. Like, just didn't really understand the full reasoning why, and I don't think anyone publicly really knew. I'm sure there was some weird decisions made behind closed doors that we'll probably never know the truth of. Now, and I know people would probably want to ask this question, but any chance they're coming back anytime soon, or what would it take for them to come back?
I suspect that they could come back. So, in order for that to happen, though, the Mohican group that runs the slots, I believe they have the slots in Niagara Falls as well, would have to make some arrangement with the Fort Erie Racetrack to do that. And I think at one time there was some discussion with them about doing that, but it really didn't come to fruition. But it was a big deal because, you know, the slot money, the slot revenue that the town was getting was significant. It was quite a bit of money. And then what happened was when they did pull out, the town had to wean themselves off the fact that they didn't have it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think which resulted in when they were weaning themselves off that money, I think there was like an 8% tax increase.
Wow, to offset.
To offset, right. So, and that took, you know, that was an unfortunate thing for the mayor to have to deal with, right? I mean, not his fault.
Yeah.
But rather than, I don't know how they spent their money. Really don't. I wasn't there at the time, but you know, to me, if there were slots today, I would probably put that money aside for infrastructure projects because when you're growing as quick as we are, would come in handy for that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times with slot money and casino money, when politicians see that, they see it differently than I do. Like I think that that is money that you should be putting aside for infrastructure or emergencies. I don't think it should be there to subsidize people's taxes because that gives people false sense.
Yeah.
That, you know, that, oh, well, taxes aren't being raised because this money is being subsidized, right? But that money's not there anymore. Surprise, surprise, you know, you have to pay the piper.
Mm-hmm.
So we did have it good for a while. I don't believe, if I remember correctly, there weren't a whole lot of tax increases during the period of time that we had slot money. If I remember correctly, you know, some of that money was going to subsidize taxes, and then the reality of life hits you, and then you're stuck.
Yeah, no, and that's like it's almost like you need to have that base rate of what you're paying, because if it's too subsidized for too long, people will you know, maybe not save as much money as they normally would have had allocated for their taxes or for any other unforeseen expenses. And so yeah, I could see that being an uncomfortable situation, being the elected official at that time, having to be the bearer of bad news and, you know, be the reason why, or, you know, people will see that person as the reason why they're now paying more taxes, when really it's just that, you know, they made hay while the sun shined, but the sun didn't shine anymore. And so yeah, no more bingo money for them. And that kind of brings me to another theme I wanted to talk about, was just about how Fort Erie, over these years, a lot of people would write it off as to saying, oh, well, it's just a border town, or like the only reason that it is a town as big as it is because it's siphoning energy and money off of the big cities on the other side, like Buffalo. And I do think that in the past that might have been the case, that this was a place that was more so like a satellite campus of Buffalo for a lot of different companies, for a lot of people that wanted to have a Canadian location or Canadian base, or a place that they could send all their product to before it gets distributed across Canada, or you know, that they would bring their minerals or their resources to before they got brought over to the U.S. side. But I think that what we've seen in the last few years is that this is not the case anymore. And so going back to how there were some of these things, like the loss of the slot machines at the racetrack, that really slowed down the growth in this town. Now, some of those other events, like you were here when 9/11 happened, and so that must have been tremendous. Like the slowdown that occurred after that, when the borders were closed and when it became a lot more difficult for people to cross. Because prior to then, you only needed a driver's license to go each way over the border. And it was, I think, shortly after 9/11 when they brought in the passport rules, where everyone had to have a passport in order to cross. And someone out there will probably correct me, but I know it's a very small percentage of Americans that actually have a passport. So even a lot of these people that live along the border that might have come over here once, twice, maybe even 3 times a week to go to the grocery stores here, or just to go to the restaurants here, or just to have any sort of entertainment here, were now not able to, or is much more costly, became a lot more of a process to come over here. and that must have been quite a big hit to the local economy and to the tourism at the time.
So at that point, I was chair of community gaming, which is oversees the bingos. And when I come in, they were like on the downside. We had numerous challenges. Before I tell you what those are, I have to tell you that bingos were huge. Every bingo hall was always packed, full of Americans. And they were the ones that mostly carried the bingos, which were doing spectacular things, by the way. I mean, bingos built the Leisureplex. Bingos built the town hall. Bingos built the YMCA. Pretty certain of that. It was bingo money going to funneled through groups, not-for-profit groups of town, clubs like the Kinsmans and those people who made donations to build those buildings. So you can see how much money was involved just by those 3 buildings alone. So, and not only that, but support to youth groups in the community and to seniors and to disadvantaged. So bingos were that big, and you could do certain things with your bingo money. Couldn't subsidize taxes, thank goodness for that. But everything else was good. So then we had the challenges were, to begin with, it was the smoking legislation. Because a lot of Americans that come over wanted to smoke, and then all of a sudden they couldn't. Even though, they had these $500,000 air flows in there, which really you wouldn't know anybody was smoking to begin with if they did, right? That cut a lot out. And then, of course, the passport legislation. A lot of people who go to bingo are older ladies, come from Buffalo, and they bring their relatives all in, and they go there and they want to smoke and play bingo. That's what they want to do. That's part of the gig, right? But like you said, not everybody has money for passports.
Yeah.
Most bingo players aren't rich people. They're just people looking for something to do and hoping to hit something, right?
Yeah.
So, so we had that happen, and we had construction on the bridge, and like the passport legislation was, to me, it was almost like the nail in the coffin. And so bingo will never be the same unless, of course, everybody starts getting passports to come back. But it would be good enough probably to, it won't be as good as it used to be, but it still will give some support to some of these groups. But right now, for instance, there's only one bingo hall open. The other one doesn't want to open until the COVID thing. And of course, COVID. If I forget about COVID, that doesn't help matters either. The COVID's really slowed that boat down too, right?
Yeah, and that's one thing I wanted to get to is that there's been so many of these different events. The loss of the slot machines was one big hit.
Right.
Another one was the no smoking legislation. So now all those smokers in Buffalo now stayed on that side and didn't come over here. And there's a lot of people in Buffalo that, especially back then, that smoked. So that was another huge demographic that was lost. That's not coming here anymore. With 9/11, I mean, just the fact people were less likely to want to travel, but then the requirements that came after that from needing a passport, it was just one blow after another. So I think that's probably what held Fort Erie back from growing to its full potential at that point. It kept having these setbacks, but I think what happened though in a way was that it allowed for other parts of the economy to kind of be forced to bolster themselves up. Businesses that were not reliant on the tourism from Buffalo or from the States as much. And what's incredible is looking at when COVID hit, when the borders were completely shut, where you were only allowed to cross over if you were a essential worker working in healthcare or transportation or something similar to that, going across the border as part of your job. Now, unless that was the case, no one's going over, and it's crazy. I mean, obviously, I don't want to take away from, there were some businesses that really felt that more than others, and some families that felt that more than others, but I still just think what a silver lining it is to see all these new businesses that have popped up in the last 2 years from the beginning of 2020 to now, there's been well over 40 businesses, I think it is, that have opened up. Many of them we've been able to have ribbon cutting ceremonies for to celebrate, and it's always mentioned in someone's speech at those events how incredible it is to open just to even open a business in general, but to do so during a global pandemic, which we haven't seen in 100 years, is just it really, I think it goes to show that Fort Erie is no longer dependent on having that U.S. connection for its survival and its growth. That at this point it's only just a catalyst to have there, but it's not the engine that it was in the past. And so I think that just goes to show how much more resilient the town's economy has gotten, and how it has become a lot more diversified as well. That it's not just storage, it's not just warehousing, it's not just logistics, that this really has grown to be its own standalone community. I mean, you look at the even within Ontario, the tourism that we've seen in Crystal Beach is incredible. You have people from all across the province, when they're not able to fly overseas because of COVID restrictions, they're all coming down here now. You look at Ridgeway, you've got people from all across the region, even people in Niagara-on-the-Lake, my hometown, prettiest place in Canada, they say, making their way down to Ridgeway because of how damn beautiful it is, and all the different beautiful shops that have opened up, the amazing restaurants that they have. It's also, of course, you've got all these staples in Stevensville. You see the growth that's happening out there. You look at Bridgeburg, all the revitalization that's happening down here. Exciting also, I know there's a million things we haven't talked about yet, but with the streetscaping plan that's coming down here, all the new businesses that are positioning down here, all the new investment we're seeing from across the world. I think it's really exciting to see, even with the border fully closed, that we're still growing. So that kind of makes me think we don't have this crutch anymore of relying on the states for our growth, that it's completely within now. It's not that we're dependent on the growth of Buffalo or any other metropolitan area, that we're really seeing this ourselves now. And I think this is really the big eye-opener, that Fort Erie really is its own community and doesn't have to rely on these other factors anymore. I think COVID, if anything, has probably sped it up with the growth. When you think of all the people who have come and visited through taking a short-term rental or staying at a campground or wherever it might be, that now are buying their own house down here and are moving down here. Mm-hmm. So would you say the best days of Fort Erie are behind us or in front of us? Because if you asked this 5 years ago, I think the answer might have been different.
Well, I guess I would say maybe both. Because the years that I've had here up to this point, have been good years for me. So you were right about the less reliance on the states, though, because the smoking legislation, what that did is it really took out the hotels. So there used to be a time in town when, just down at this end, I would say we had 5 or 6 hotels down here. And, once the cigarettes were done, people are smarter now. They don't smoke, not as much. But that really killed the bars. But I like what you were just saying about, how COVID's really not affected some people. And you're right, we've been, I don't know how many, over 40 anyway, where you see young people, it's mostly young people. And mostly young women too. This is the thing, that are opening up their businesses on a wing and a prayer, really. And each one of those openings for me, that's like a joyous occasion, because where once stood an empty building, and we don't know the story of that building, might have been a store that had closed. So I'm always happy to go to those things, because it just goes to show that there are still people believe that this is a community to invest in, whether it be big or small, and they all bring something to the table. And then once they all, I know you've noticed it, is once they all get in there, they work together to help each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of collaboration, not as much dog eat dog.
Yeah, dog eat dog type of stuff. They work together with each other. And some of those things that we went to, for instance, down in Crystal Beach, was an opening over here. And the lady over here that makes the goodies was bringing the goodies over here. They were buying that. So
Yeah,
they're
a lot of
working together
collaboration.
to help each other. And that's a good thing, to have close-knit businesses down working together to make sure their streets work.
Mm-hmm.
And Ridgeway does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're about to embark on some pretty big things in Bridgeburg. And, you know, to be a counselor nowadays, if people think from 1 minute that being a counselor means you know, you go to your council meeting, you go to your committee meeting, and that's basically it. How wrong can they be?
Yeah,
You
that's the tip of
cannot
the
be.
iceberg.
You can't be an effective counselor unless you have time in your hands to do the things you need to do to make your ward work. And when I came into office, we had went probably 8 years previous to that where a whole lot of not too much was being done. And I just thought to myself that, do I really want to enter into this thing? Because like there's so much work to be done. We're so far behind here. How do we manage to do this? And I had to talk myself into the fact that I was confident enough to run and try and make a difference. So, you know, I made some pretty hefty promises when I ran. You know, we had 3 schools to repurpose. We had Road Seaton over here. We had 2, Fort Erie High School, Fort Erie Senior Elementary. How am I going to manage to do that? You know, the street is old. It needs to be brought up to snuff so we can make it a catalyst for new business to come in. And then you have to find people that are going to invest in that community all at once, right? And I got like 8 years to do it. So, you know, that's pretty steep stuff when you really think about it. And if somebody would call me back then on my promises, I say, you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen,
Well,
right?
And looking back, so now the Fort Erie High School and the Fort Erie Elementary School, both now an international school, Fort Erie International Academy. And how many students are there right now?
There's a couple hundred students now, but at its peak, there could be anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000.
Well, it's just incredible when you think that 2.5 years ago there were 0 students there. Now you get several hundred from across the world, and even in the middle of a pandemic, when borders closed all across the world, they fought and they were able to get the students. I mean, it definitely took a bit of time and a lot of quarantines, I'm sure. But to finally be able to get the school up to this level now, despite there being like a global pandemic, is it just incredible. Looking at Jarvis Street, the fact that there's now an approved streetscaping plan there, that we've already seen so many new businesses come into that street. I mean, we've even had a few grand openings there in the past few months, and I just can't wait. And once people actually see the shovels in the ground too and start to see the actual end product of this streetscaping, whatever investment is there now and development is there now is just the beginning compared to what will come once that streetscaping plan is underway and concluded. So it is kind of funny when you think, if you can go back and tell yourself back in 2014 when you first got elected that this is what's going to happen. If you could have shown yourself a little video, you probably wouldn't have believed yourself and would have freaked out, like, why is this man from the future here?
Well, you know, they were hired on as part-time counselors, and which is humorous to begin with, because if you're going to be a good counselor, you pretty much have to be able to put in the time.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a lot of people think, well, I can go work my 8 hours, come in and do this, but I don't think you can be as effective as what we are now here, because I have to be out pretty much every day. It's like, you know, sometimes it's 5-6 hours a day, because most of the time you're dealing with people that you're trying to get invest in your area. And if not in your area, then we look elsewhere. I mean, you and I have been on trips. We've looked all over the place to try and show people what we have here, and the fact that we're happy to have them here to invest. We don't really care what part of the community it's in, but for the most part, I'd like to get a little bit down here, right? So eventually, after the streetscaping job's done, I mean, if I have another term in me, I would probably move over to the other street, which is Courtright, another part of the BIA district that's kind of went downhill by the fact that the former Barney house had a fire. It's sitting there empty. Williams Gold, which has been there forever, just sitting empty. So there's a couple of things down there that we could, get somebody to invest in, tear them down, build up commercial element with apartments to intensify the area, which is what we do on Joe's. Since I come in, we've had double the amount of apartments that we started with. So many of them taking advantage of CIP programs for facade and for the apartments. So, it benefits anybody that wants to invest in the downtown. It's going to get a bit of a break. So it's, I don't know, it's far from being easy. Sometimes I go home and I just sit back in my chair and I say, I can't believe this, what's going on here,
Yeah, and for you to go back for another term too after 4 years of, like you said, it's part-time. They say it's part-time, but it really is full-time. I mean, it's, however many hours in a week it is.
You have to be available at all times, no matter what people say. And if the councillor's not available 24/7 to the residents, then they're not worth the grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what I pride myself in. It's like, I'm here for the residents, and when they're tired of me, they'll let me know.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it, right?
Yeah.
But I think most of them think I'm on the right track. I don't get too many. I get the odd complaint, but I don't get too much of you're not doing nothing, because that wouldn't be true. I'm doing something every day.
Yeah, well, it'd be kind of weird if you didn't get any negativity. I mean, what they say, if you ever want to be prime minister or president, you gotta be comfortable with half the world hating you.
Well, I do. I do get some negativity. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast.
That's part of being a human.
Right. I mean, and who's perfect? And, there's not like, what people don't realize, this is not there's no qualification to be a mayor. There's no qualification.
18, resident of the community.
All you got to do is meet those few little things. There's no degrees in municipal work. I mean, there's just not. So what you have to do is kind of make sure when you're picking people that they know what they're talking about. They know how to relate with people, because I relate with people all the time. I have to. It's like even with the school over there. It's like they have different things where they're trying to expand their business. And when the people from different colleges or different universities come here to discuss matters with them, they like to have the councillor there. Having the councillor there gives some credibility to everything they're doing. Would I be there if they weren't as proactive and trying to do the things that they had to do? Probably not. But I am there when they ask me to go, because normally it will mean more kids coming to the school. So there's different things going on over there where they're drawing some attention to some college programs, university programs that could be here in the future as well. They're also opening up a daycare, a much needed daycare center for the downtown here. That's going to be in January, I guess, if that's coming. So there's different things that they're doing. In fact, helping us with letting us use their pool while the Sugar Bowl is under construction. So there's a lot of give and take there, and I make the time, because every time I do, and it causes more people to come to the school, that's better for the downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So right now what we're doing is we're taking a survey of the students that come from outside the country. And they come from China, they come from Afghanistan, they come from Korea, they come from, I think, Germany as well. And a lot of Niagara people go to that school. But we're taking surveys now to see what type of businesses they would like to see close to them that might be a benefit to them.
Mm-hmm.
And once we do that, we'll share that with people that are going to invest on the street and make sure that they deal with that, because that could be a village of over 2,000 or 3,000 people.
Yeah.
Like, people don't realize this, but they've already spent $31 million over there, And it's a $90 million project, so we have a ways to go to make sure we shepherd that through. So when the project's that big, your councilor's got to help shepherd it through, because there's always problems, you know, although they're not with the town anymore. We don't have too many problems with the town because they know the significance and the value of that place, right? And so do the people downtown. So the school and the streetscaping go hand in hand. The streetscaping will be a catalyst to bring in more business, which will help facilitate some of the students' needs. And, you know, maybe in the next term of office, somebody, whether that be me or the next person, would come in and maybe do Courtwright Street and make that more of an entertainment part of the district, you know, maybe with some Irish pubs or some microbreweries or something more along the lines of entertainment. So you have the entertainment in the back and the business in the front.
Yeah, well, especially the fact that you have the world famous Niagara River right there as the backdrop.
Yep.
I think it is one of the most beautiful gems in the world. You know, Sir Winston Churchill always said it's the most beautiful Sunday drive in the world. And
but would he today?
Would he today? Well, if he were alive, I'm sure with the cigar in the side of his mouth, he'd say, "Yeah, it's still great." But just looking at the, you know, it's currently December of 2021, and we're coming up to the new year. Now, do you have any big plans for the new year, 2022 coming up?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, that's
we're just gonna ride with what we got right now. I really have been very fortunate that I've been able to work with staff and the mayor and council to get the things done that I had to get done. I mean, when the school came and that deal needed to be brokered, they were unanimously behind me. They were unanimous about the Sugar Bowl Park and the splash pad versus the pool type of thing. They were unanimous in that. So in most every case, we've been unanimous in the fact to move things forward to this end. You can't beat that. So, I mean, you can't, that's the other thing. People who are going to join politics in the future, remember this. You cannot work unless you make friends at town hall. You have to be able to relate to staff in a kind way and think about everything that you're doing affects them as well. So, the other thing is being kind to each councillor that you deal with. You know, yeah, we argue a little bit, but you know what? It always is forgotten at the end of the night. You know, it doesn't happen very often. I mean, the last two councillors we've had, I think have been pretty. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I just think the people that I've worked with have been brilliant, and I think that probably the last two councillors that I've seen are the best that I've ever seen. And I've seen councillors since the town hall was sitting at the corner where the courthouse was. And I've always been involved some way or another, right? So they're a very impressive group of people. And if you work together, it goes to show, yeah, you're not going to make everybody happy. You know, it's very tough to make people happy nowadays. and I mentioned this probably 4 years ago, that anybody that's going to come into politics today, you have to have double the thick skin that the people before you had, because the people have changed immensely in the delivery of the way they speak to you, the way they work with you, the way they send you an email. You know, it's not all pleasant stuff, right? You take your fair share of baloney too, right? So you have to remember that they're in charge. You have to listen to it. But I mean, there comes a time when I've had people call me, and when they get into the name calling, I'll kind of say, well, my part of this conversation's over.
Yeah.
Right? And I normally just leave it at that. You know, people will vote for you or they won't. Simple as that, right? But if you're working for them, I think for the most part they'll vote for you. But there are times when people really get out of hand, and emails are probably 10 times stronger now, and stronger language. And
yeah, well, that's the funny thing. It's so different when you're in front of someone and you actually have to face them, and you have to basically deal with the consequences of what you say. But people love to have that, to be anonymous, to be behind a screen is just so much easier to just throw something out and just say, whatever. People will do that as their own little bit of therapy. They'll just throw some hate out into the world thinking like, I got that out. But then all they've done is they've added more negativity out there. Now this other person's going to go and write something negative, or maybe they'll go punch their dog or do something else. Like, you're just putting bad energy out into the world. People don't realize that compared to if you're in person. But no, I think that, and like I've said, that the amazing things we've seen in this town, it's from every individual is a part of it, from the councillor to the everyman. So I just want to say thank you for your service, Councillor McDermott, and whether it's yourself or someone else, I hope that this next term, next year, and forever into the future has good leadership around the table. And I just want to say thanks for coming on my podcast.
Happy to be here.
All right, well, take care, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that, and take care.
That was easy.